Welcome to Small Biz Flash, your briefing on small business news, trends, and insights. I'm your host, Adam Hewitt. Thanks for joining me. Sales is foundational to the success of your small business, but many small businesses struggle to get sales right. And as they scale, they make costly mistakes. Today, we'll talk to an expert about how a fractional sales approach can help. That's coming up right after the news roundup. All right. Let's dive in. As negotiations continue in Washington over raising the national debt ceiling, there are fears about the fallout to small businesses if a deal isn't reached. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, there are several potentially devastating consequences should the federal government default on some of its debt, which could happen as soon as June 1st. Recession would be even more likely than it already seems to be, for example, but a default could make any future downturn even more severe. The credit crunch, which I've documented repeatedly on this podcast, could get worse for small companies, and those businesses that do still get access to credit would face even higher interest rates. Economists also foresee a default bringing additional inflation, because weaker global confidence in the dollar would yield it less purchasing power. Small businesses are slowing down their hiring, according to the Wall Street Journal. Less than half of owners plan to add to their payroll over the next year, a survey conducted by the paper found. That's the lowest rate since the summer of 2020, early in the COVID pandemic. While owners have consistently reported finding talent a big problem, the shift in attitude toward a hiring freeze is due to several factors, including a worsening economy and customers cutting back on orders. Despite the challenging times, or perhaps because of them, small business owners are looking for growth opportunities. That's the finding of the 2023 Truist Small Business Owners Survey. The poll found that 51% of owners have growth-oriented objectives, while 45% said they need to improve their skills in prospecting for new customers. 37% said they need to get better at networking to generate referrals. You can find more information on this and other stories in the news roundup by going to the links in the show notes. Small business owners, your finances are the cornerstone of your business. You need the bookkeeping pros at SBS Accounting and Advisors to keep your AP, AR, and financial statements on track. For 16 years, the good folks at SBS have been helping owners like you make better decisions and grow their profits. So go to sbsaccountants.com today to set up a free 30-minute consultation. Use the promo code FLASH to get 20% off your setup fee. Again, that's sbsaccountants.com. So on today's podcast, we have David Lusk. He is the managing partner of Evergreen Sales Group. He is a fractional sales leader for small companies. And so, David, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's great to be here, Adam. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So maybe the first thing we do before we get into the meat of the subject is tell us what a fractional sales leader is, because I suspect maybe there's some folks out there that are a little bit wondering about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Just got that this morning, as a matter of fact. So think of it as leasing the talent that you need. So one of the things small businesses struggle with is resources and money to pay sales talent. So for 1/6 of the cost, you can lease sales expertise.
Well, that's great. And a lot of small companies are doing fractional CXO, so you can think about, COOs and CFOs are a common approach for fractional work. And so having a sales leader in a fractional role makes a lot of sense as well. So thanks for that. So one of the things that we want to start with is some mistakes, right, that smaller companies make when they are hiring for sales. And I've been documenting for months on the podcast all the issues that small companies are having right now in hiring. The talent is really hard to come by. Bigger companies are gobbling up the talent and paying more. And so that's just one issue. And also just because of the threat of recession that seems to have always been right around the corner. Companies have been afraid to overcommit, and there's just all sorts of issues that small businesses are having right now. But when they do make a hire for the sales team, sometimes they can really make big mistakes that cost a lot of money. So could you kind of dive into that for us just a little bit?
Sure. So from the sales perspective, which gets a lot of attention in businesses because the business owner's like, if I could just get more sales in and we could grow and, we'll get healthy. So they want to go out and buy some sales talent. So they typically will do one of two things. Either they'll spend a lot of money on that big gun savior salesperson who's going to go out and drive all this revenue for them, which turns into a little bit of a problem later on because they become so dependent on that big gun that if that person leaves, then they're really in a corner and there's just a little too much. So they spend too much and get too little value. The other thing they do is if they have a sales force, they might take their top producer and turn that person into a sales manager. That's a problem because you're taking your best person out of the field that's producing good revenue and asking them to do something that they may or may not be highly qualified, because the skill sets for selling and managing and leading are very different. And that's a difference in a fractional versus others. So fractional is not consulting. Fractional is really somebody that has the skills and the leadership to lead that aspect of the business for them.
So that's a great point, or those are great points, David. And I think this would be a great time to mention that David is generously offering the listeners of the podcast a free giveaway. It's going to be an assessment for a tool for folks. And David, maybe you talk about that just briefly, because I know to your point about taking the highest level or the highest achieving producer and maybe moving them into the sales manager position, that is a very common mistake, and it can be just that's a doozy of a mistake, and a lot of people do that. And so your free giveaway sort of will help people maybe avoid that mistake.
Yeah. So what we're offering your listeners is what we call a Willset Motivator. And if you look at the sales function, there are two components. One, do they have the skill to do the job? And that's typically where a lot of owners focus in on. The other aspect is, are they motivated? Is it really what drives them? Because some folks are very motivated by money and they just want to go out and do deals. And other people have a stronger bent towards developing others. So the Willset Motivator allows an individual to gain insight into the temperament and the motivational set that's within the salesperson. And it gives you a really good data point. So we offer a lot of assessment tools. This is one of our favorite. It's about a $250 assessment tool that's available to your listeners for free.
David, that's great. And we're going to have David's information in the show notes so everybody can find out how to get in touch with him and get access to that Willset Motivator. So you mentioned that the fractional approach is about a sixth of the cost. Can you speak a little bit more to that and what the fractional engagement looks like and how that typically works?
Sure. So in the U.S., your average sales leader is going to have about a $200,000 to $270,000 compensation package. If you break that out on a monthly basis, what you're doing is, in fact, leasing that same capability for a fraction of the month. So you're getting a certain amount of time that's dedicated to your business to drive your own activity. So it becomes a very affordable option for folks to work with. If you also think about developing a sales rep over time, it's about $12,000 to $15,000 a year over a 5-year period, and that becomes very expensive. So a good fractional resource will help coach and develop both you and your sales team to get a little bit more proficient in how to position and sell your business's products and services. Okay,
and so let's say that I'm almost a micro business. Maybe I'm a business where I'm the owner, and I've been the main sales guy or saleswoman, and I'm trying to start building out a team. Maybe I've relied mostly on my personality or my charisma to sell, and I need to start being a little more, systematic and methodical, and build out a playbook that other people can kind of repeat, as opposed to me just sort of winging it. Is that something that you can kind of help with? And how does that work as far as, what advice would you give to a company that is sort of in that boat and wants to become a little more professional and kind of go to the next level and not be so centered on the personality of the founder or the owner?
That's right, because sales is part an art and a science. And so that art aspect is your personality and your kind of, esprit de corps. How do you actually engage, with people and impact people? But there's a lot of science around persuasion. How do you position your solution? What types of questions do you ask? Are all questions created equal? So what we can do as fractional leaders is just really become your coach and just have periodic meetings throughout the year, not at a different price point, obviously, than what we would normally charge. But we can effectively give you feedback and help you think through particularly larger opportunities. How do you have those discussions? How do you want to present your solution? Who needs to be involved in that decision? How do you want to position your negotiation? So all those kinds of things that you would just love to have access to, we can provide for you at that fractional rate.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, we're going to put a link to David's information in the show notes so you can get in touch with him and get access to that free Willset Motivator. And we'll talk with you again soon, David. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Adam. It's been an honor.
Thanks for listening to Small Biz Flash. I'm your host, Adam Hewitt. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about the podcast, and a comment on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube would be great as well. I sure do appreciate it, and I'll see you next week.